But we're here to ask questions, and I do have a couple of questions in my time remaining. Mr. Bove, can you share with us how many of the prosecutors assigned to the Capitol siege section were fired after you sent your memo on staffing at the Department of Justice?
I don't recall.
Ballpark?
I don't recall.
All right. Well, I'll submit that in the form of a question for the record to allow you time to jog your memory banks and try to give us a number or at least an estimate. Can you tell me how many January 6 rioters President Trump pardoned?
No, I don't recall.
In a stunning Senate Judiciary hearing, Senator Alex Padilla exposed Donald Trump's latest judicial nominee, Emil Bove, not as a defender of justice, but as a political enforcer. From purging prosecutors to protecting January 6 rioters, Bove's record raises serious questions about corruption, loyalty tests, and the future of America's courts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I want to begin with a couple statements, not specific to the nominee before us, Mr. Bove, but general observations as we've had hearings of nominees and on issues since the beginning of the year. It's become clear that President Trump clearly has one litmus test when selecting people to appoint. It's not experience. It's not dedication to our country or the rule of law. It's whether or not a potential nominee is willing to bend or ignore the law to satisfy the president's whims. Now, I understand that elections have consequences, and one consequence is that a president who is elected will get to nominate judges for the duration of his term or her term. But selecting someone with such a deep track record of vindictive, duplicitous behavior, of abuse of power, that is and must be treated as unacceptable. From Mr. Bove's time with the Southern District of New York to his time representing Donald Trump to his time at the Trump Justice Department, it's been demonstrated that he will not let the law stand in the way of doing what he wants. That's why as soon as Mr. Bove joined the Justice Department in an acting, unconfirmed capacity, he began an effort to purge the Department of Justice of perceived, quote, enemies, like the January 6th prosecutors. He even called the January 6th prosecutions, quote, a grave national injustice, and ordered the FBI to produce a list of everyone involved in them. Never mind the fact that he had previously worked on January 6 prosecutions while at the Southern District of New York. And that's why he ordered Southern District of New York prosecutors to dismiss criminal charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams in exchange for Mayor Adams helping to implement President Trump's radical immigration enforcement plan. Mr. Bove's actions in this case led 8 prosecutors, 8, including the interim U.S. Attorney, Danielle Sassoon, who had clerked for Justice Scalia, to resign. But instead of firing him, Donald Trump plans to give him a lifetime appointment to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in New Jersey, a state that Mr. Bove has very, very little ties to. Now, it's not just Democrats who are concerned. Conservative judicial activist and former Republican staff member of this committee, Ed Wallen, who wrote that Bove has been called, quote, a savage, and likened him to a, quote, mafia henchman. Not my words, just quoting what's been submitted to this committee for consideration. The Wall Street Journal published an editorial urging this committee to ask questions about Bove's qualifications for this seat. They wrote, quote, does Emil Bove have the right judicial temperament? Does he have a judicial philosophy? It's seemingly clear that the more we learn, the answer is no. But we're here to ask questions, and I do have a couple of questions in my time remaining. Mr. Bove, can you share with us how many of the prosecutors assigned to the Capitol siege section were fired after you sent your memo on staffing at the Department of Justice?
I don't recall.
Ballpark?
I don't recall.
All right. Well, I'll submit that in the form of a question for the record to allow you time to jog your memory banks and try to give us a number, or at least an estimate. Can you tell me how many January 6 rioters President Trump pardoned?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. Well, that actually kind of makes sense, because I don't think when asked, the president himself couldn't give an exact number. When asked, his response was, quote, "It would be very, very cumbersome to go and look." You know how many people we're talking about? 1,500 people. To think that on the first day in office, he would have considered case by case that volume of files to make the determination that they should be pardoned, that's clearly not believable. And we know that dozens of those pardoned had prior criminal records, including rape, sexual abuse of a minor, domestic violence, and more. Yes, I'm talking about the January 6 rioters. I'm going to end with this, Madam Chair. I can tell you that a long-serving prosecutor with the D.C. United States Attorney's Office thought that it sent a message that, quote, "political violence toward a political goal is acceptable in a modern democratic society." Mr. Bove, you contributed to these actions. What do you think what kind of message do you think this sends to the American people?
I think that the president, in his exclusive discretion under the Constitution.
My question is, what message does this send to the American people? The pardoning of January 6th rioters, many with prior criminal convictions.
And you can answer briefly.
I think that's a question that calls for political views, and under the canons, I'm not able to take a position.
I thought we were talking about public safety and the rule of law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
In a heated Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Senator Alex Padilla drew a sharp line between judicial integrity and political loyalty. Sitting in the hot seat was Emil Bove, Donald Trump's nominee to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. What unfolded was less a routine confirmation and more a case study in how fragile America's justice system can become when loyalty to a politician outweighs loyalty to the rule of law. From the very beginning, Padilla set the stage. He acknowledged a basic truth: presidents have the power to nominate judges. That's part of the political process. But what Padilla argued is that Donald Trump's standard is different. His nominees aren't chosen for experience, or for a dedication to justice, or for respect for the Constitution. Instead, they're chosen based on one test: are they willing to serve Trump, even if it means ignoring the law? Bove's record, Padilla argued, shows exactly that kind of loyalty. During his time at the Department of Justice, serving in an acting, unconfirmed capacity, Bove wasn't working to uphold the law. Instead, he was accused of purging prosecutors who had investigated the January 6 attack on the Capitol. He described those prosecutions not as necessary accountability, but as a grave national injustice. For many Americans, January 6 was one of the darkest days in modern history, a violent attempt to overturn democracy. To label the prosecutions unjust flipped reality upside down. Bove also went so far as to order the FBI to provide him with a list of every prosecutor involved in January 6 cases. To critics, this looked like intimidation, a way of singling out public servants for doing their jobs. And that wasn't the only alarming episode. Padilla pointed to Bove's role in pushing for the dismissal of criminal charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Why? To gain Adams' cooperation with Trump's immigration enforcement policies. If true, this was nothing short of bartering justice, trading dropped charges for political favors. That's not the role of a neutral prosecutor. That's the behavior of someone treating the law as a bargaining chip. The consequences were dramatic. 8 federal prosecutors, including Danielle Sassoon, a respected conservative lawyer and former clerk to Justice Antonin Scalia, resigned in protest. Their departure sent a loud and bipartisan message. Bove's conduct wasn't just controversial, it was unacceptable. And indeed, concerns about Emil Bove have not been limited to Democrats. Conservative legal voices and even Republican staffers have expressed doubts. One, Ed Wallen, described Bove in language more suited for organized crime than for a courtroom, likening him to a mafia henchman. Even the Wall Street Journal urged the Senate to question whether Bove had the temperament or philosophy needed for a lifetime judgeship. When Bove himself was pressed for answers, his testimony offered little reassurance. Asked how many prosecutors were forced out after his memo on staffing, he said, "I don't recall." Asked how many January 6 rioters Trump pardoned, he replied again, "I don't recall." The reality, as Padilla pointed out, is stark. Over 1,500 people connected to the Capitol attack received pardons. Dozens had prior records for violent or sexual crimes. These were not harmless protesters swept up by accident. Many were repeat offenders who had already proven to be a danger. Pardoning them in bulk sent a dangerous message that political violence, when committed for the right cause, would be excused. For Senator Padilla, that message was clear and chilling. It tells Americans that violence can become a legitimate political tool rather than a crime against democracy. And it tells future presidents that the justice system can be bent to protect allies and punish enemies. This isn't just about one nominee. Appellate courts like the Third Circuit shape the law on issues that affect millions, from civil rights to immigration, from workers' protections to the balance of power between states and the federal government. A lifetime appointment means Emil Bove could be making those decisions for decades. The question is whether he would make them as an impartial judge or as a political loyalist.
Padilla closed his questioning with a powerful reminder. The framers of the Constitution created an independent judiciary for a reason, to make sure no president, no party, no faction could put themselves above the law. Judges were meant to be guardians of liberty, not enforcers for political leaders. But if Emil Bove's record is any indication, that independence is at risk. The Senate now faces a choice. Confirming Bove would mean rewarding loyalty to Trump over loyalty to justice. Rejecting him would mean defending the principle that the courts belong to the people, not to a president. In the end, this hearing wasn't just about Emil Bove's qualifications. It was about what kind of country America will be. A nation where judges serve the law, or a nation where the law serves those in power? The answer will echo far beyond this one nomination. It will determine whether the rule of law still stands as the backbone of American democracy. Emil Bove's nomination isn't about fairness or qualifications. It's about Trump rewarding loyalty and punishing accountability. If this is the kind of judge being handed a lifetime seat, Americans should be deeply concerned about the future of justice. What do you think? Should Emil Bove be confirmed, or is this one nomination too far?